will try and project as best I can. Okay? Second, remember that we'll finish things off on Monday. The goal today is to try to take the content story up into the 20th century. Then we'll finish off the 20th century on Monday. Remember, too, that the bulk of the AP multiple choice exams, 50%, runs from about this time, early 1800s, to 1915. So this probably gets a little extra study, okay, a little extra time. As we go through the slides and we finish off first semester, the slides on first semester tend to have more detail. Remember, you're looking for the things that aren't clicking. Something you look at and go, wow, I don't remember that. That's something you ought to jot down so you go back and study. Don't jot down the things you already know. Okay? It'll never get done. When we get into the second semester set of slides, and we'll start that in about 15 minutes, they tend to be smaller, not as much depth, because we've been with that pretty recently, and I hope that we don't need as much depth with those. Okay? So, a little bit different approach for the two semesters. This is where we left off. We had fixed slavery forever in America, which means we can have an election in 1824. John Quincy Adams, the Secretary of State for James Monroe, and that begins this process of people expecting Secretaries of State to always then become president. Runs against Andy Jackson, Henry Clay, and William Crawford. Jackson got the most popular votes, however, he did not get the majority of the Electoral College. Kicks the whole thing into the House of Representatives. The House picks John Quincy Adams, and Andy Jackson says it's the corrupt bargain, because Henry Clay wound up getting appointed as Secretary of State. And that looked like it was going to be the stepping stone into the next presidential term. We should note that, given all of their history, it would be most unusual for Adams and Clay to have engaged in such a corrupt bargain. Nothing else in their career fits that, but it does look bad. And Jackson is the man of the people. He said he was the people's choice. He is enormously angry and hurt, and he spends the next 4 years campaigning for the presidency. Andy Jackson comes in, election of 1828. It is a bitter and personal election. It is dirty and nasty. The supporters of John Quincy Adams have gone right after Jackson's wife, Rachel. In fact, she dies during the campaign. Jackson never forgives the supporters of John Quincy Adams. Jackson gets elected. He institutes the spoils system, rewarding his friends with government positions. He has unofficial advisors meeting with him in the White House we call the kitchen cabinet. It is something that brings the common people into government, but maybe not always the best advice. And Jackson gets criticized heavily for that all the way through. Jackson takes on the National Bank. It's the target, he says, of the target of the people because it only favors the well-to-do. In 1832, Henry Clay convinced the president of the bank, Nicholas Biddle, to put it forward as a recharter early. It wasn't due to expire for a while. Webster, also one of the opponents of Andy Jackson, get this in front of Jackson, and Jackson vetoes it. No bill, no bank. Jackson picks up the nickname King Veto. He becomes the guy who used the veto more than any other president before him. This sparks off later, after Jackson leaves office, a huge financial downturn, the Panic of 1837. Jackson leaves before it all happens. He walks out the door as a hero. We've split the political parties in half. The era of good feelings from the Monroe administration have disappeared. The opponents of Jackson, since they nicknamed him King Veto, now take on the title from the British, the Whigs, our new conservative party. Jackson, believing in the heritage of Thomas Jefferson, resurrects the old idea of the Democrats, two-party system, Whigs and Democrats. During Jackson's presidency, sectionalism makes a dramatic comeback. The Missouri Compromise obviously didn't work. We haven't fixed everything for the rest of history. We see it in the Tariff of Abominations in 1828 when South Carolina tried to get it changed, and then they had the 1832 tariff, which resulted in a downward trend of the tariff, but not enough. So South Carolina threatened to secede from the Union. John C. Calhoun secretly wrote to the South Carolina Exposition in protest. Later that secret comes out. Government secrets are the worst kept secrets in the world. They just never stay hidden. South Carolina went and had nullified the tariff. Jackson got the force bill through Congress, and literally it looks like civil war is going to break out. The United States versus South Carolina. As a compromise, in steps the great compromiser again, Henry Clay, shaping and molding America one more time. And what we do is we start a process where the tariff in 1833 will then, over the years, gradually ratchet downward so it reaches the level it was back in 1819. Everyone can kind of live with that. Jackson walks away, saving the country. Henry Clay walks away, position he hopes has made him the new president of the United States. Remember Jackson and the connection to democracy is one of the major themes of this part of the course. Demos, rule of the people. Jacksonian democracy is the natural progression and follow-up to Jeffersonian democracy. Jacksonian democracy, however, is actual rule by the people. Jeffersonian is more patriarchal, the great white father looking out for all the little children, trying to get them ready to take over one day. Jackson's time, all the children are ready, except Native Americans. Jackson doesn't like Native Americans, considers them to be crude, barbaric, they're not ready to rule. He actually engages on a number of different pursuits of persecution. However, remember, in a really weird, bizarre twist, he also adopts an Indian son. Never really does much in life, and we don't get much information about that son. Okay? John Marshall actually made a case that favored the Indians, the Supreme Court Chief Justice. Jackson said if John Marshall wants to enforce that decision, he can get an army. And Jackson begins to move Native Americans out of the American Southeast into the West, and that's the infamous Trail of Tears. A lot of reform movements going on. Means America's economy is getting a little bit better if we can worry about the internal social conditions of the time. We've got prison reform, women's movement, drinking, temperance, religion. We have the Second Great Awakening. We see the rise of new Protestant faiths, especially the Methodist, which is sometimes called a mud religion because it was out on the frontier. And we have the rise of the most important reform movement of all, abolition. Early American literature. We haven't had much. Quick. Like now what you don't know. Hopefully we know about it. Okay. Early 1700s, the best we have are some of the old Dutch folk tales, the Knickerbocker tales. One of the most famous is Rip Van Winkle, who talks about James Fenimore Cooper. He wrote The Last of the Mohicans. Remember, he has that recurring action-adventure story, Nanny Bumppo, kind of like a late 1700s, early 1800s version of James Bond. I was like that. Who are you? Bumppo. Nanny Bumppo. Okay. No, huh? Too early in the morning for that? All right. Mid-1800s, however, we developed the first real true American style of literature, your favorite transcendentalists with Emerson and Thoreau. Immigration. This one goes bigger than just one particular chronology. It's kind of an overview, a theme from the late 1800s, excuse me, mid-1800s on. Sometimes the College Board likes to see that. They like to see the progression, particularly with a topic like this. This is a new nation of immigrants. They had a role in the Revolution. And then look, we take it all the way down to the 1920s. So we've got quite a thing going on. Hey, God bless you. All right. We have the old immigrants from the early to mid-1800s. New immigrants, look, they're different in terms of where they're from. They're different in terms of how we react to them. Much more nativism for the new immigrants than there was for the old immigrants because their religion is different. Their ethnic background is different. They seem to be dangerous to the people here, plus the people here are more vested in their society by that point, and they don't want competition for jobs, property, wealth. So it becomes a pretty negative deal. One of the ultimate negative deals we see is the quota system of 1920, where people are actually limited not by their occupation, where they are today, but by their ethnic background, what country they came from.